Oh, gosh darn it, don't you know? I'm a cheesehead baby, the pride of Wisconsin.
And Grandma's cooking pot pie.
Oh, I'm not so typical. I'm a cheesehead baby, the pride of Wisconsin.
Mom's playing Cheesehead.
Oh, I'm not so typical. I'm a cheesehead baby, the pride of Wisconsin.
Jim Bob, where the hell's my bowling ball?
Muito bem, senhoras e senhores, estamos começando o nosso episódio número 208 do podcast, da nossa live do Lambeau Leapers Brasil. Eu quero lembrar a você que é muito importante que num dia tão especial como esse, recebendo um convidado especial e internacional, você continue compartilhando a nossa live, compartilhando o nosso perfil, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Nós estamos falando do Packers o tempo todo em vários lugares. Se você está assistindo a gente aqui pelo YouTube, se inscreve no nosso canal para que você possa receber todas as nossas informações, todas as nossas lives aqui. Tá bom? Nós estamos aqui hoje, eu, Paulo Cardim, o nosso Guto, nosso especialista Augusto Edinger. Eu perguntei como é a pronúncia do sobrenome dele, ele me disse, o Guto, e o nosso convidado especial de hoje, Paul Bretl. O Paul é escritor no Dairyland Express, CheeseheadTV, ele também é co-host no Packaday Podcast, e você pode encontrá-lo no Instagram, Twitter, @Paul_Bretl, ok? Então, nós estamos começando o nosso tempo aqui, nós temos várias perguntas, vamos falar muito de Green Bay Packers, com muito clubismo, mas tentando achar um monte de informação que o insider pode nos dar. So, let's go. Let's begin our chat about football and Green Bay Packers. So, first of all, Paul, I wanna say thanks for your presence here tonight. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. We love the Green Bay Packers, and I can safely say to you that we can only do what we do here because guys like you, insiders covering the Packers, are sharing with us everything you can about the franchise daily. So it's such an honor to have you here. We're very, very happy, and I hope we can do this one more time in the future. But let's go. So first thing I want to do here is that I want to start by asking you something very personal.
Mm-hmm.
How did you become a Packers fan?
Well, I'm not sure how exciting my story is. I live in Green Bay currently, and that's where I was born and that's where I was raised. I mean, I don't know if it's cliche to say that it's a way of life up here, but it absolutely is. I mean, everything centers around the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay, Northeast Wisconsin, and Wisconsin in general. On game day, businesses aren't shut down, but there's really nobody out and about. Everybody's watching Packers football. So that's just kind of what I grew up around. But I think what really drew me to it, one, I just love the game of football, but my grandparents, still do live 2 blocks away from Lambeau Field. Right now I live just outside of Green Bay, about 15 minutes away, but they live 2 blocks away from Lambeau Field. So Lambeau, Green Bay is not like other NFL cities. There's no big skyscrapers. There's neighborhoods around Lambeau. And if you're not parking at Lambeau Field, you park at people's houses and they charge you, money to park your car there. So that's what my grandparents did. That's what they still do. And so when I was 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 years old, just kind of throughout my childhood, on Sundays, I would get dropped off there early in the morning and I would just hang out for the day. I would, in air quotes here, help. Can't imagine I was much of a help, but just hang out with the tailgaters, toss the football around. And then when the game would start and we'd watch it in the house, you can see Lambeau from their backyard and you'd see the touchdown on the TV. So I'd run, I'd open the back patio door and you could hear the crowd, you could hear the music going. And so those are just some of like my early memories. And, at the at the core of it, like I said, football, the Packers specifically, is just it's what people do up here, because Green Bay is 100,000 people. I mean, the grand scheme of cities out there, it's not like it's that big. The Packers are it here, but also just kind of those core memories growing up of being around the game, the Packers, the time with my grandparents. I think that's where it really just kind of cemented that love and just became kind of a part of my life growing up.
Nice. Do you think that this is the reason that makes the Packers an unique franchise in football?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I guess I can't speak. I haven't been to like a Packers game at another stadium, but it's just a different vibe on game day. Everyone's walking around, they got their beverages. It's just, like I said, everything just kind of shuts down because everything centers around the Packers. In a lot of those bigger cities, there's, other things to do. And not to downplay Green Bay, there's stuff to do here, but it's obviously at 100,000 people, when most cities have NFL cities or professional sports team cities have millions. There's just not the same thing here. So it's the center of what everyone does. Same thing with like training camp practices. That was another big part of my, childhood growing up, spending some summer mornings there and just watching the Packers practice.
Nice. Now, one more personal question, okay? What was the most memorable moment for you covering the Green Bay Packers?
So I obviously write a lot about the Packers. I watch everything very, very closely, but I'm a fan as well. Like I said, growing up here, and I don't have like media access. Like I'm not in the locker rooms or anything like that. So I don't really have any sort of inside type of thing to share. So my perspective of it is as a fan, just like the rest of you. And the thing that comes to mind was that Titans game from 2 years ago. So first, I'll just say I started writing about the Packers around the 2018 season. I really dove into it in 2019. And I mean, this is just it's a passion of mine. I absolutely love doing it because I love this team. But that 2020 game against the Tennessee Titans, because I remember many of us, that was kind of the game where we were all a little fearful of Derrick Henry coming in against that Packers run defense. Yes. But the way they just shut him down, they dominated that game. And then of course we had some snow coming down as well, just to add to the game itself. But obviously it didn't turn out this way, but it was at that point where I was like, this team's going to the Super Bowl. That was I knew they were good. And I'm like, holy cow, they are a really good football team moment for that season. So that was at the end of the year. And just as a fan, that excitement that it brought of, wow, this team is for real. Because they didn't just beat a very good Titans team. Like they dominated that game. So that's one of those most recent memories since I've been writing about the team that stands out to me, just because of that feeling of excitement that we haven't had. And I know that sounds kind of, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, because the Packers have been very good for a long time. But for me anyways, that was the first time I was like, whoa, this is a Super Bowl team right here. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, and that was the game that probably represented to AJ Dillon, right?
Yep,
that was his probably his first big game.
I think it was.
I remember watching, and I said, "Whoa, that's a running back. We got a good one." And obviously, I thought that 2020 season, I thought, well, the Lambeau Field, the road to the Super Bowl, or they're going to go to the Lambeau Field, and that was frustrating in the end. But I got you.
Yeah, that was like the first real time during Rodgers' time where we were like, all right, everybody has to come to Lambeau Field. Like it's Lambeau, it's January, it's 10 degrees out. Like this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. They went 13-3. They smoked the Titans, a really good football team. It just felt like it was all coming together, what we've been waiting for so long, but not quite.
Now, Guto, do you have a personal question for Paul?
Yes. First, welcome, Paul. Thanks for the time.
You. Of course.
I love your wall.
Oh, thank you.
It's funny you say that, but the city really breeds the team, né? Okay, então one of the reasons I support and me, I love the Packers. The city connection on the team is special, is different. Uh, what do you say?
Did you understand the question, Paul?
Oh, no, he had. I think he cut out. I missed it. He said he loves the connection of the city with the team, and then I lost him.
Yes. Can you repeat, Guto, please?
Okay, so the team and the city is a special connection. So, what do you think about this?
I think that's what, like you said, it's what makes the Packers special. You know, if you have the opportunity, I think it's online on their team website, Packers.com, where they have like the documentary where it's like 10 episodes and every episode's a decade from the 1920s to 30s and so on. And I watched that a few years ago when it came out, and I learned so much. Like, this team should have folded. This team should not be around. There were so many things stacked against it, just to keep ways of getting money just to be able to buy uniforms and to be able to pay players like through the 30s, the 40s, the 1950s. And the fact that they still remained in the grand scope of the NFL, have been one of the most successful franchises there. That story in itself is fascinating because, as I just said, like, in how things typically play out, like, the Packers shouldn't be a team. They should have folded a long, long time ago, but they kept finding ways. And the way that they found ways was through the community, the city of Green Bay, Northeast Wisconsin. And so in part, that's where that connection comes from, because it truly is the city's team, because the people of this town, back in those early days, they helped keep this team afloat, so they could become a functioning and profitable and highly winning organization. And like I said initially, I was talking about my childhood. The Packers are it here. Like, there isn't others, there's not a lot of other stuff to do here. You go to Packer games, you go to practices, like, everything around here is centered around it. It's just a really, really cool connection between a professional sports team and the city and the state.
So I believe off-season is a problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, in recent years, Mark Murphy has done a really good job of making Lambeau Field not just the destination in season, but just everything to do with the Titletown District, the Hall of Fame tour, the stadium tour, all of that stuff. They've done a tremendous job of making it, a year-round destination, because learning about the Packers history through the Hall of Fame tour and just, being up here in Green Bay, it's truly fascinating.
Nice. Now, let's talk football in this 2022 team. Let's talk about the draft. I know that we've been reading a lot, and I know that probably most of Packers fans got a little frustrated after Quay Walker's pick. But what do you think about the 2002 and 22 draft class of the Green Bay Packers? What did you like? What did you not like? How do you evaluate this class?
So I'll start by saying the Quay Walker selection definitely caught me by surprise, because the linebacker position just typically hasn't been one that the Packers have invested heavily in, whether it's free agency or the draft. Not that it hasn't been a need, because it has been, but they just haven't invested in it. So in the same offseason that they signed Devondre Campbell to a 5-year, $50 million deal, I would have bet a ton of money there is no chance that they spend one of their first round picks on the linebacker position. So that surprised me. But why they did it makes sense. With having Walker, who, like Campbell, can play the run, can play the pass, he was a super, super reliable tackler at Georgia. Having them on the field together is going to allow Green Bay to stay in their base nickel defense more regularly. And that's going to keep offenses. It's going to make it more challenging for opposing offenses to kind of guess what they're doing. Because last year they had a bit of a tell. If Chris Barnes was on the field with Devondre Campbell, more likely than not, they were playing the run. if Chris Barnes was off the field and safety Henry Black was out there, more likely than not, they're playing the pass. But now when you have Walker and Campbell together, and both who are very capable against both the run and the pass, there's going to be an added extra element for the offense to try to decipher, because they're not going to be sure what's taking place. So I absolutely understood the selection from that standpoint. But again, just how the Packers have operated, it 100% caught me off guard. As far as wide receiver goes, because obviously that was the big and still is the big topic of conversation among fans, I get why, just given how the board fell, why they didn't draft someone at 22. So if we look at, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, they both were top 10 picks. The Packers weren't going to have a chance at drafting them. Who is left then? Then New Orleans traded up with Washington. So Washington went back to 16 and they chose a receiver, Jahan Dotson. Washington may not have been willing to trade with Green Bay to 22, because if Green Bay was going to get Olave or Jameson Williams, they were obviously going to have to move up, just as the Saints and Lions did. So if we look at who Green Bay could have potentially traded with, it was Washington. And again, they obviously wanted a receiver too, so maybe they weren't willing to fall back to 22. The Vikings, who Detroit traded with, I know the Packers traded up to get Christian Watson with Minnesota, but who knows? Maybe the Vikings weren't willing to give Green Bay, that pick so they could get another weapon, a more proven college weapon, I'll say, like a Chris Olave or Jameson Williams at that point in the draft. We get to round 2, maybe things change. All of this, of course, is speculation, but I just don't think the opportunity was there for Green Bay to move up to get Olave or Williams. And then there was Jahan Dotson and Treylon Burks in the mid-teens that went. And I just don't think that those are guys that you would have traded up for. Now, if Treylon Burks fell to 22, I absolutely think that pick was in play. But for me anyways, if there's receivers that you're going to trade up for, it was the 4 we mentioned, Olave, Williams, London, and Garrett Wilson. So with those 4 off the board, I just didn't think trading up made sense. And I also, again, Washington being there, Minnesota, I don't know that they were, because trades, it's a two-way street. Both teams have to want to be able to make it happen. I don't know that either of those teams are going to be willing to go back to pick 22, because when you're talking from 11 to picks 11, 12, I mean, that's a decent way to fall back. So I get why the receiver, why they didn't take one at pick 22. Overall, I'm a big fan of this draft class. I think they have a number of guys who can be immediate contributors. Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt are going to be on defense. Christian Watson, I mean, right away with that 4.36 speed, he should come in and be a deep threat. He's someone that they can use on gadget plays as the motion man. Not that you're going to want to give him a ton of snaps or any snaps out of the backfield, because you have Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, but he did do that at North Dakota State. So that just kind of illustrates what he can provide. He's a willing blocker. So right there, you have some niche roles for him to fill. The big question for him is, can he be the guy? It's 3rd and 5. Packers are at midfield. They need a first down to keep the drive from stalling out. Can he be that guy that Rodgers can consistently rely on? We don't have that answer yet. But in terms of his skill set, it's certainly dynamic and exciting. And his ceiling is so high. I mean, his ceiling, whether he reaches it or not, we don't know. But his ceiling is up there with, the top of this draft class at the receiver position. And I love that they address the offensive line as they have under Brian Gutekunst, because the competition among this group prior to the draft, the depth of this group, was a major concern. But that seems to be very much alleviated now with Zach Tom, who legit might be able to play all 5 positions. Sean Ryan was a left tackle primarily at UCLA. He can play right tackle for the Packers. He can play at the guard positions. So I'm always a fan of building the offensive line depth, because I think it gets a little overlooked last season because they had so many injuries and so much movement. And when you factor that in, this group held up well. But also the offensive line play in 21 compared to 2020, it dropped off. I mean, there was a decent drop off, which shouldn't be a surprise. Again, they had so many injuries. But that drop-off in play affected the run game. There were way fewer explosive run plays for the Packers. They went from 53 in 2020 to 36 in 2021. So almost cut in half. Play action wasn't as effective. Again, probably because defenses weren't as fearful of the run game, but also I don't think Rodgers had a ton of time to be able to turn his back on the defense either. So there was a lot of trickle down effects throughout the offense because of that offensive line play. So being able to bolster it, I think, is going to be the catalyst to this group still being effective this season. As far as what I disliked, there was nothing that I felt strongly about that I disliked. I would say the head scratcher for me was that they didn't address edge rusher sooner. I think Kingsley Enagbar, he can be an effective player on obvious passing situations, third downs, 2nd and 12s, those type of situations. But again, he's a day 3 pick. There's risk that comes with relying heavily on someone taken at that point in the draft in their rookie season. Doesn't mean he can't come out and be a stud. Just typically what we see, that takes time to develop. So I thought that they were going to address that position sooner. As good as Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith were last season, there was a significant drop-off in play when those two were on the sidelines. And edge rusher is a heavily rotated position. They were on the field for about 68% of the defensive snaps each. So that's about a third of the snaps, and that's normal. Again, it's heavily rotated, but that's about a third of your defensive snaps each week. They're played by other guys. And, of course, you're not going to match what Gary and Preston do, but the Packers just need more from those backups. So edge rusher is one of the most important positions in the game. I wouldn't have been surprised whatsoever if that was one of their first-round picks, especially with this being such a strong edge rusher draft class. So, again, we don't know how the Packers valued those draft picks. We don't know if the board just fell in a non-favorable way for them. There's a ton of variables, but just given the need, the importance, what the depth chart looks like, that was one of my big, like I said, head scratchers from it.
Okay. Oh, so many good things I want to share, but I want to ask Guto. Guto, what is your question? What do you want to say right now?
So, do you talk about the Williams go to the Lions, the trade with Vikings? The price is very little. So, the Williams, the Watson, the class of wide receivers, Davis, Watson, and Toure. What the player with the plug and play for the 3.
Which can you plug and play the quickest of the 3?
Yes.
I would say Christian Watson for the reasons that I mentioned. I think with that speed of his, you can use that downfield threat, those gadget plays. And LaFleur does a very good job of just getting guys in space. That's what you got to do. Get him in space, get him the ball, and then just let him do what he does best. Romeo Doubs, he was another big play threat coming out of Nevada. In 2020, he had the 3rd most downfield receiving yards out of any receiver in college football. And this is a Pro Football Focus stat. Downfield receiving yards are passes that travel at least 20 yards. So you're trying to push the ball downfield. So he was one of the most effective in college football at that. But I think with Watson and what he brings in this skill set, he's the one of the 3. He's the one you can just plug in right away and have a designed role for him. What I will say about these two as well is the Packers return teams might be receiving a big boost as well. We know the special teams unit as a whole was just bad, very bad last season. But Christian Watson, he was an All-American kick returner at North Dakota State, averaged over 26 yards per return. Romeo Doubs had 37 career punt return attempts at Nevada, averaged over 12 yards per turn, which is a really, really impressive number. He had a touchdown. So in addition to what those two can add on offense, the Packers return units might get a needed boost as well.
Okay, you mentioned the special teams, and we're going to address the elephant in the room in the next few minutes. But first, I have one more question about this draft class. In Brazil, we're a little far away geographically, and we rely on Twitter. And as I said before, you guys that are covering and writing about the Green Bay Packers, so we can't have that many informations about the OTAs and who is doing great, who's having a bad OTAs. um, and a bad OTA. So, how are the freshmen training? And which one's enough? Is playing and training enough to play in week one? I mean, you said about Watson, you talked about Watson and Walker, but who will have the biggest impact in week one, in your opinion?
In week one, I would pick Quay Walker. And I think a lot of that just simply comes down to playing time. I think that he is going to be linebacker 2 right away next to Devondre Campbell. As far as the receivers go, Aaron Rodgers said it himself. He wants production over potential. They have a lot of potential on this roster at receiver, but not a ton of production. And I think it's important to note that the Packers in general, under Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst, they prefer experience. Now, that doesn't mean a rookie can't come in and start right away. Doesn't mean they can't have a big impact over the course of the season. We've seen that a number of guys do that. But in terms of preferred starters, like the Packers draft them, and right away in practice, they are the guy at the position. The only 2 that come to mind for me are Darnell Savage and Josh Myers. Like Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson in 2018, in terms of snaps, they began the season behind Kevin King and Tramon Williams. Eric Stokes last year was behind Kevin King in terms of snaps. Elton Jenkins in 2019, he didn't become a starter until Lane Taylor got injured. Rashawn Gary was obviously behind the Smiths. So there's, and A.J. Dillon was behind Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Josiah DeGuara had Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan. So not that guys can't come in and have those immediate impacts or become starters, but for the Packers, at least early on in practices and even early on in the season, as some of those examples show, the rookies have to show that they're prepared and that they're ready to go. Just because you're a first-round pick doesn't necessarily mean that, he's the first-round pick, we spent pick 22 on him, he's our starter. They have to go out and earn it. So with that said, the receivers, I think, are going to be the go-to guys early on, are going to be the veterans, going to be Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, and Al Lazard. So I think the impact from the rookie receivers, it's just going to be lessened because of that. And also the Matt LaFleur offense, when it's doing what it should, the tight ends are a part of the passing game. The running backs are a part of the passing game. Aaron Jones has been second on the team in targets each of the last 3 seasons. So with spreading the ball around more of the veterans, the receivers, I don't see making the biggest impact. So for me, it comes down to one of the defensive guys, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt. And obviously, depending how the offensive line unit shakes out, if Zach Tom or Sean Ryan become one of the starters, they have that opportunity as well. But at this point in time, they still have to earn that. Devontae Wyatt's going to be part of a defensive front rotation where there's going to be a strong 5. It's going to be him, Dean Lowry, Jaron Reed, Kenny Clark, and TJ Slayton. So obviously we know Clark's going to take his share of snaps, but I think the rest of those guys, at least early on, are going to be rotated fairly regularly. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, Quay Walker is the one who I see having the most steady snap count, the most steady presence of these early round draft picks. And so for that reason, I would, at this point in time, pick him to have the biggest impact.
Okay. Guto.
Tonyan's return could be important for Rooker's receivers. I agree.
Do you agree? Did you understand his question?
Sorry, it cut out again. I just missed it.
It's cutting. Guto, can you repeat, please? It's about Robert
Okay.
Tonyan.
Tonyan's returns could be important for rookies receivers. Okay, do you agree, or not?
That Tonyan's return is going to be important for the receivers?
Yes.
I mean, for the receivers specifically, I don't know how much interaction he has with them. I'm sure there's little tidbits he can give during practice. But for the passing game in general, his return is going to be massive for this offense. Football is one of those games, and I know we all like to pick one thing that, affects everything, but football is one of those games where there's no one answer to any problem. There's always a million different contributors. And the Packers offense wasn't as effective last season, in part because they didn't have Robert Tonyan out there. The other tight ends that they have on the roster, and this is still a question mark, they can't affect the passing game like he can. And we saw that last year. Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that Josiah DeGuara and Mercedes Lewis, when they were their most productive from like weeks 11 to 15 or somewhere in that range, that's also when the offense was really firing on all cylinders, because having a tight end to affect the passing game is an important part of this offense, and someone who can be a threat down the seam, over the middle of the field, in the red zone. I mean, that's what was missing without Robert Tonyan. And so until he returns, and again, we don't know when that's going to be, that's a big question mark for this passing offense. Can Tyler Davis step into a larger role? There's a lot of, Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, Rich Bisaccia, they're all really hyping him up this offseason. So it'll be fun to see, what he does this summer. Can Josiah DeGuara take that step forward between years 2 and 3? Those are going to be big question marks that are really going to affect this passing game early on, until Robert Tonyan can return.
Okay, let's move on. We have been chatting for 30 minutes, and if we don't move on, we're gonna spend 2 hours here. So, at that 49ers game, a lot of things went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, special teams comes to our mind.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the whole season that was a huge problem. Now we have a different holder. We have a different long snapper. Rich Bisaccia is here, and there's a lot of buzz because he was a head coach, and he was being interviewed for a head coach position. So there's a lot of expectations on Rich Bisaccia. Now there is, I don't know if there is, but apparently there is a competition to Mason Crosby. We don't know, and I obviously don't think that there is a real competition. But with all that said, what can we expect about this unity under Rich Bisaccia?
I would say I feel like the biggest thing that we've seen so far is accountability. Just in the responsibilities, what your responsibilities are on the special teams unit. I feel like that's really stood out in his interviews. We've also seen the Packers, and I wrote about this like right after the season ended. For the special teams unit to be better, there just needs to be an organizational shift in how they view it, how they prioritize it. Because while last year was really, really bad, the special teams unit has finished in like the bottom third of most rankings for like a decade plus. Like the Packers special teams unit, yes, last year may have been the worst, but they've been bad for a long time. There needs to be a shift in how they view that third phase of the game. And whether it translates to the field or not remains to be seen. But I feel like we're at least seeing those steps take place. One was hiring Rich Bisaccia, who reportedly, I think it was Tom Silverstein of Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Bisaccia is either close to or is the highest paid special teams coordinator in the NFL right now. So just the fact that they were willing to open up the checkbook, bring in the guy that they feel can turn this unit around, that's a great first step. On top of that, it sounds like he has a say in what's taking place. You mentioned Pat O'Donnell, the punter, who's going to be the new holder. Bisaccia talked just said a ton of good things about him. He's never been on the same team as him, but he's someone that he wanted to bring with him to Las Vegas and where he's been in his career. Keyshawn Nixon, he played under Bisaccia in Las Vegas on special teams. So you have to think anyways that he had he was tapping on Brian Gutekunst's shoulder saying, hey, let's get this guy. And then you look at the draft class. Quay Walker has almost 500 special team snaps in college. Tariq Carpenter in the 7th round has over 400. I talked about Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs as return men. Samori Toure could be one of the gunners. Any of the offensive linemen they selected could help beef up the field goal and punt protection units. So there was not that I think they went into the draft, looking specifically at, he's really good at special teams, we got to take him. But I think that was a larger part of the conversation as well. And the other big thing is starters playing on special teams. Usually when we talk about special teams, it's back end of the roster guys, undrafted rookies who are going to fill those roles. But so far in OTAs, we've seen Devondre Campbell, Aaron Jones, Adrian Amos taking snaps out there with the starting special teams unit. Now, I'm not predicting that those guys are going to be out there week one, maybe not, but they're at least giving them the reps. So if, what hits the fan, and they at least have some reps and some experience in that role. So you add all that together. And again, whether we see that turnaround on the field, we just got to wait and see. But you add all that together, and that's part of that organizational shift I had mentioned earlier. They're viewing it differently. They're addressing it differently. They're going about solving it differently. And that's what they had to do.
The best thing is still Mason Crosby on the special teams.
So I agree with you guys. I just don't think that there's a true kicker competition taking place. This is a team with Super Bowl aspirations, and they just signed an undrafted rookie, had a very nice career at Oklahoma, but there's something to be said for Mason Crosby, who's in his, 15th, 16th season, when it's 15 degrees on a Sunday night in December in Lambeau Field, and the Packers need a 38-yarder for the win. I feel more confident in Mason Crosby than what I would a rookie. And I think that's a part of the equation. And as bad Crosby wasn't immune to the special teams issues last year, but it wasn't all his fault either. I mean, there were some kicks he missed, of course, but there were bad snaps. There were bad holds. The blocking was incredibly inconsistent. Like, not all those misses fall on his shoulders either. And I think the Packers know that. So there's just too much risk in relying on a rookie to come in and, again, hit that game-winning field goal for you in December and January when your season's on the line. Whereas we've seen Mason Crosby do that a number of times.
You mentioned punt protection. Sometimes I have nightmares with Tyler Lancaster protecting a punt, protecting a field goal. That image haunts me.
That was one of the most frustrating part about last year's special teams unit is the mistakes. They were very similar week to week, which then you wonder what's being corrected, what's being worked on in practice. And that's, at the end of the day, that's the real issue.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the Chicago Bears owner, Aaron Rodgers, because there was obviously this expectation. Is he coming back? Is he not coming back? Is he retiring? Is he requesting a trade? And he decided to come back. And when he decided to come back, we all thought, well, if he's back, then Davante is going to be back too.
No kidding.
We all thought that. And what happened is that Davante left. Personally, I think that the general manager did a nice job with that. He got two picks, first and second round. So that was a good thing for the Packers. But obviously, for right now, there's a lot of questions. Davante Adams was the guy that Aaron Rodgers turns to at that point. And you said something about Christian Watson. Can he be that guy? Third down. Can he do it? And we don't know. Now, we always thought that there's this thing between Rodgers and Adams, and right now we don't have 17 anymore. That brings us a question. Is there life after Davante Adams? I know, we all know that yes, but how important is going to be Matt LaFleur's scheme this year?
It's going to be incredibly important, that that run pass mix to keep the defense guessing about what's coming next. Sometimes they would get a little bit, or they would get away from using motion, which again moves the defense around and can sometimes provide Rodgers with some pre-snap tells on what they're trying to do or where guys are going to be. That's going to have to be a part of it. And like I mentioned earlier, just getting guys into space. This wide receiver room, it's not as good without Davante Adams. We all know that. But it's going to take Matt LaFleur, his ability to scheme guys open. It's going to take Aaron Rodgers playing at a high level to help lift that wide receiver room up. And when you have the best or close to the best running back duo in football, hopefully Robert Tonyan comes back, Matt LaFleur's scheme, Aaron Rodgers. If the offensive line is fully healthy, this should be one of the better offensive line units in football. And then defensively, I mean, this could be a top 5 defense. You know, on paper, they at least look like they have that potential. We'll still wait and see. But when you add all those pieces together, that can hopefully mitigate the absence of Davante Adams. And there's also the point to be made as well. You know, when Aaron Rodgers was, you know, under center with Davante Adams, more times than not, you could kind of guess where the ball was going. But if you have Aaron Rodgers playing like Aaron Rodgers and you're the defense, and even if the receivers aren't as good as Davante Adams, but you don't know where he's going with the ball, I have to imagine that's going to make things very, very challenging as well, even though you don't have 17 on the sidelines or on the field.
Okay, Guto, about wide receiver, this team, what do you have to say or ask about that?
So the thing with the chemistry and Adams, Rodgers. Now Watson is the next, or others guys from the paper, Tonyan, Aaron Jones, and AJ Dillon.
Yeah,
What
let
do you-
me add something to this question. How important is going to be Sammy Watkins, Alan Lazard, and Randall Cobb, because these guys are probably the main target from Rodgers. So good to talk about Tonyan, Watson, but how important are those guys going to be for Rodgers?
I mean, especially early on in the season, incredibly important, because I don't know, not that they're not going to get their opportunities, but I don't know how many targets Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are gonna get early on in the season, because we know how much Rodgers values experience, and that's what those other 3 players have, you know, over the rookies, obviously. So that's going to be an important part. And then Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard, with Davante Adams here, both of them have still been wildly successful on third downs and in the red zone for Aaron Rodgers. So in those type of situations, I think those are going to be his 2, you know, like we've talked about, who's going to be the guy. I think early on it's going to be those 2, because Sammy Watkins, even though he's a veteran, you know, this is still his first year in Green Bay, his first year with Aaron Rodgers. Now, the big question for Lazard and Cobb is, can they continue to be efficient on third downs and in the red zone without Davante Adams? Because 1, there's going to be more opportunities, and 2, if Davante Adams is out there, obviously there's less attention on Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, but now there's going to be more attention on them. So that's going to be one of the big things to watch. But they're going to, I expect them to lean heavily on their veteran pass catchers early on. And just one other thing I want to add, I wrote an article about this at Dairyland Express, because I know Rodgers, or rookies under Aaron Rodgers, they don't have a ton of success. And my point with the article was not that I expect any of these rookies to have this, you know, massively big season, but when other rookies have come along, there's been established receivers here. There's been, you know, Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, Jordy Nelson, Davante Adams. So if you're a rookie and there's Davante Adams or Jordy Nelson, any of those guys, and you screw up in a game or you miss something in practice, you know, Rodgers had the luxury to look towards, oh, I'll just go to Davante Adams. I'll just go to Donald Driver. He doesn't necessarily have that this year. So how things play out, maybe it's similar, but I also think it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison either. And if this team wants to be firing on all cylinders, you could say that maybe they want to try to get the ball a little bit to Watson and Dobbs early on to gain that experience, to go through those lumps, because there's going to be routes ran the wrong way. There's going to be drop passes. That's just how it is. They're rookies. They're young players. But you'd rather have them experience that in September and October versus December and January.
Okay. Let me run away very fast of our schedule here, because the last episodes of our podcast, there was a lot of jokes about Amari Rodgers. Obviously, he had a disappointed first season. Do you think he can step up this season?
Aaron Rodgers?
Amari Rogers,
Oh,
sorry.
Amari Rogers. Sorry.
Rogers, Aaron had an amazing season,
Yep.
obviously. Amari Rogers, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's one of the biggest. It's funny. We've been talking about receivers quite a bit, and that's the first time he's been brought up, which just kind of already shows that he's, I guess, a little bit of an afterthought. The hard part for me is that his role or his skill set and what he does is very similar to Randall Cobb. And we know that Cobb, we've talked about, he's going to be relied upon heavily early on in the season. The one thing I would say about Amari Rogers is I think a lot of the sour taste that many fans may have in their mouth is about his last season was his punt returning. And that's obviously not playing receiver on offense. Now you could say he didn't see the field much, which is also very true. So this is going to be an important summer for him. But man, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure. I think we just have to see how things play out, because hopefully he takes a step forward in year two. For most NFL players who end up being successful NFL players, that jump from year one to year two is one of the biggest ones they're going to make. So obviously you're hoping that with him, even though he didn't see a ton of the field, he's still been in the meeting rooms. He's still been on the practice field. He's still learning the Matt LaFleur offense. But in terms of where he's going to fit in, that's tough because of Randall Cobb. Maybe they use him, try to get him some, quick passes in space. He'll take some snaps in the slot, but his playing time is going to be very much determined by what takes place this summer.
Yep, I agree with you. Now let's move to the other side of the ball. Let's talk a little bit about our defense. We had first game of the last season. I thought, well, this Saints loss is well. And I think we're going to another season with a lot of defense problems, but then Joe Barry's defense stepped up. We saw Stokes playing well in his first year. We had obviously Devondre Campbell playing probably the best at linebacker position, being the best at a linebacker position. So after years and years of problems, we had a decent defense, but we still had problems. Quay Walker, as you said, is probably one. It's a way that LaFleur and Gutekunst are trying to fix those problems. Do you believe that with this defense that we have now, this roster, do you believe we have an elite defense, and what can this defense bring to this team in this season?
I think on paper they absolutely have an elite defense, because if you look at who the regular starters are going to be, I mean, there's not a weakness. I mean, you have Gary and Smith at edge. We've talked about the linebackers. They have, possibly the best cornerback trio in football. You have two experienced safeties, and Adrian Amos remains one of the most underrated, not just safeties, but players in football. He puts the word safe in safety. He's so reliable back there. And this is also going to be the deepest and best, or should be, Green Bay Packers interior defensive line unit. All those years of get Kenny Clark some help. Well, he's got some help now. I mean, Jaron Reed can play both the run and the pass effectively. Lowry's coming off his most productive season in terms of pressures. And Devontae Wyatt, I mean, with that athleticism, sky's the limit for him. We'll see what we get out of it. But this defense has absolutely the potential to be one of the best in football. And like I mentioned earlier, with staying in their base nickel, I think that's going to just add some added complexity for offenses, because there's not that tell like there was a season ago in what they're doing out there. And they're going to, not that they need this defense to be elite to be a good football team, but for a team with Super Bowl aspirations and the question marks that are just there on offense, at the receiver position, the Packers, realistically, they might not put up points at the same clip that they have the last couple of years. Hopefully they do. I hope I'm wrong, but I think realistically, just given what's happened on offense, that might not be the case. And that means you're going to have to rely on your defensive side of the ball more to pick up the additional slack a little bit. So I think they have all the potential in the world. They have playmakers every spot. The run defense should hopefully be improved this year. And, if a few more of those pass deflections turn into interceptions, I mean, like I said, sky's the limit with this group.
So one question of the defense is fast. What part of defense do you trust the most? The secondary, linebackers, the line?
Do I address the most in terms of who the Packers should add to?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the second, I mentioned edge rusher. That's a tie. I'm going to cop out on you guys. It's going to be edge rusher depth or secondary depth. You know, I already talked about edge rusher, so I won't get back into that too much. But there's some question marks, and I guess piggybacking off of what we just talked about, the consistent contributors to this defense on paper. Again, it looks like a top 5 unit, but the depth there is a question mark. Can Kayshawn Nixon be a reliable fourth corner? Can Shamar John Charles step up? At safety, it's just a big question mark behind Amos and Savage. Kind of the same thing at edge rusher as well. So if I had to choose which of those I'd add to, it'd be edge rusher, just because you at least have 3 corners, 3 very good corners. You have 2 very good safeties. But behind Gary and Smith, and again, that's a very, very heavily rotated position, that's the one that I'd add to. But as good as this defense looks, there's still question marks kind of throughout it about the depth of that group.
Adding to this topic, we're about to get into July.
Mhm.
That means that the Packers could have cut some players. We've heard something about Dean Lowry. Could he be cut? And the other question is, can the Packers bring someone to contribute now? Do you believe that we will see post-June cuts and other free agents that can really help this team?
I don't think we'll see any post-June cuts. The 2 that stand out just in terms of cap savings for the Packers are Dean Lowry and Mason Crosby. I think with both, they can save over $5 million in cap space this season. But we already talked about the risk that comes with relying on a rookie over Mason Crosby. And I just don't think the $5 million that you could save from moving on from Lowry is worth it. I think that, you know, chances are there's probably going to be some regression just because he's coming off his best season in terms of pressures, and that's just kind of what happens. But that not having him on the roster weakens that position group. And again, you're a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Why would you want to weaken a position group? So I just don't think it's in the cards that they're gonna cut any of those guys. I just don't see like a Jack Heflin or a Jonathan Ford along the interior defensive line, you know, being able to step in and be a key rotational player. So I don't think there'll be any cuts right now after releasing Kurt Benkert. They do have 89 players, so they do have roster space to add someone without making a cut. You know, in typical Packers fashion, it'll probably be someone none of us have ever heard of, but they do have the cap space and to add, you know, a decent player to the roster. I don't think they're going to go out and spend, you know, major dollars by any means, but you know, they have the flexibility to go spend $2-3 million on a player. And I think it's important to note this time a year ago, you know, Devondre Campbell, he wasn't signed until I think mid-June. Dennis Kelly, who ended up starting in the playoffs, starting the last 5 games of the season at right tackle, he wasn't signed until late June or July. You know, they didn't trade for Corey Bojorquez until before the season began. They traded for Randall Cobb over the summer. They signed Rasul Douglas, Whitney Merciless in season. So I say all that to say there's still, just because the first whatever waves of free agency have gone by us, there's still opportunities out there for the Packers to find an impact player, and they also don't have to break the bank in doing so either.
Okay, and that brings us to this expectations and concerns that we have of this team. I think tight end position, you mentioned this before, is a problem. I personally don't know if Tonyan will be ready week 1. And do you think tight end position might be addressed in the free agency? I think, and let me say something more about the tight end position. We always hope that Green Bay could sign a big name. But recently, when they did, we had problem with Martellus Bennett and then Jimmy Graham. So, do you think tight end could be addressed? And if it could be addressed, what kind of player And do you have one that you would sign right away, right now, a free agent? Uh, but I wanna ask to the head coach and general manager Paul Bretl.
So I think that a tight end position absolutely can be addressed because all the concerns around it are valid. Like I'd mentioned, this offense in part suffered last year without Tunyon because Lewis, DeGuara, Daphne, Davis, they can't bring to the passing game what he can. And as you mentioned, we don't know when he's going to be on the field. So as far as the type of tight end that they bring in, I would have to think it would be more of a pure pass catching option. Because in terms of blocking, I mean, Mercedes Lewis, still one of the best in football. And even Daphne, DeGuara, and Davis by PFF's grading system, all of them finished in the top 17 last season out of all tight ends in run blocking grade. So from a blocking standpoint, they're pretty well covered. And they also have DeGuara and Daphne who fill more of that H-back role, can line up in the backfield. So I feel like they're covered in that regard. So if they are going to make an addition, I would think it'd be more of a pass catching threat to fill in till Tunyon returns, and then someone who can complement him. Now, I say all that to say I don't think they're going to add to it. The big reason being, I think that this is still, as even though the question marks are there, I think this is still a crowded tight end room. What I mean by that is we know once we'll just call Tunyon healthy for the time being. When he's healthy, Tunyon, Lewis, and DeGuara are going to be on the roster. So that's 3 spots. The Packers, not that they can't keep more, but each year under LaFleur, they've kept 4 tight ends on the roster. So you're already, if they're planning to keep 4 again, deciding between Davis and Daphne. Davis, he's been hyped up this offseason. I think Daphne can be a really good special teams player. So bringing in another tight end who kind of fits that mold, I think just further crowds an already crowded room. Now, if they have the opportunity to sign someone who is a very, very clear upgrade over, any of those other guys on the roster, that's where I think that move could be made. I apologize, I can't answer one of the parts of the question. I'm not well versed with who's available in free agency at the tight end position, but it's like receiver to me, where they'd have to be a significant upgrade. Because receiver, like tight end, for all the question marks, it's a crowded room. Like we already know, and I'm assuming Murray Rogers is going to be in there, but we already know who 6 of the receivers on this roster are going to be. So you would need, if you're going to add someone who you're like, whoa, they're way better than half this room. It would be the same thing at the tight end position. So I certainly see the value in it. But at the end of the day, if I'm making a prediction, I think that they stand pat with who they have.
Okay. And I agree with you. I think wide receiver would be this opportunity. Maybe Odell Beckham Jr., but we all know that this is not how the front office operates, right? Guto, one more question.
Okay. So the team is a Super Bowl contender. So what worries you most about this team? Do you have an Achilles heel? One point you will not like?
So we already talked about tight end. I think from a positional standpoint, that's the one that I'd put as kind of the biggest question mark. But I'll say my biggest concern right now is just offensive line health. We still don't know. Hopefully, I'm going to take the optimistic side and say David Bakhtiari will be there at training camp. He'll be good to go. But, at this point in time, we can't say that with certainty. Elton Jenkins is going to miss some time as well. And I like the depth that they have. I like the competition that's going to be there. But it's a lot of young guys as well. And we saw that last year with Royce Newman, even Josh Myers, John Runyon early on in the season. As expected, they took some lumps in their first year as starters. And the offensive line play last season, that drop off from 2020 when they were arguably the best offensive line unit in football, I think was the biggest contributor to this offense just not being as productive as they were. And I mentioned earlier their explosive run plays were way down. They were less effective on play action. Rodgers, in terms of downfield shot plays, he took 16 fewer last season. And I think in part that was because MVS was, he missed some time. But they also just didn't have the opportunity, I think, either with the offensive line, or maybe they didn't trust having Rodgers back there long enough, because this is a really interesting stat I found on Pro Football Focus. Rodgers' time holding the ball last season was actually decreased from 2020, but he was pressured 40 more times, and he dropped back fewer times as well. So that just kind of illustrates the difference in the offensive line play last season. And then you factor in that tight ends had to stay in and help, block, help chip. That was a contributor early on for Robert Tonyan, why I don't think he was as productive as he was during the 2020 season. So just that offensive line. And again, not to take anything away from them, because they had 7 different configurations last season. They dealt with a ton of injuries. They lost key players. And this was still overall an effective offense because of their play. So I don't mean to take anything away from them, but it was easy to see, and the numbers show they just weren't as effective as 2020. And I think that had such a huge impact. I mean, look at everything we just talked about. Robert Tonyan was effective, the deep ball, play action, the run game, just Rodgers, in general. Matt LaFleur had to game plan for the offensive line last season. He didn't have to do that in 2020. So if this group can be healthy, as hopefully they are going to be, I think they can be a very, very good unit in this they can be the catalyst behind this offense's success.
And as you keep talking about offensive linemen, I keep thinking, can Bakhtiari come back? Can Bakhtiari come back? We all got so disappointed when against the 49ers, we didn't see him.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that Bakhtiari can play well again, as he has been playing for the last, 5-6 years?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. At this point in time, without seeing him, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt just because he is one of, when healthy, the best left tackles, offensive tackles in all of football. And so until I see otherwise, I'll give him that benefit of the doubt, and fingers crossed, because if he's out there, this offense can function so much more efficiently.
Okay, I have one more question,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll have some think fast,
All right.
answer fast questions. Okay, but first, my question is for you. Yeah, but keep thinking about it. I have one more question.
Okay.
Do you believe that this team can again go further than the championship, the NFC championship game? Because we had 2019, 2020, 2021, and always almost there.
Mm-hmm.
Always for some details. And I keep thinking, are they going? Can they do it again? Do you believe Packers team can do it again?
Absolutely. The issue the last few seasons, and it's what happens when we get into the offseason, we wonder, how can the Packers improve? How can they be better than they were the year before? And obviously, you're always trying to be better. You're always trying to fill gaps, find areas you can improve. But the 2019 season, we'll forget about that. But the 2020, 2021 seasons, like, that team was talented enough to win the Super Bowl. They just didn't. Those are two different things. You can be talented enough to win the Super Bowl and not win the Super Bowl. What they need is for their best players to play their best in the big game. That's what's been lacking. So I do think that they are still Super Bowl contenders. I still think they can win. The big difference this season for me, when we first started talking, that feeling that I mentioned in 2020 about, this is it, they're coming to Lambeau, we can do it.
Yeah.
Everything's working out perfectly. Now they have to show me. I'm not, they can go 13-3 again or 13-4, but they have to show me in the playoffs now versus me, having that optimism and excitement that I did the last 2 seasons.
Okay. Guto, let's go to the think fast, answer fast.
Okay, let's go.
Let's do it. So we have prepared some answers. You have to choose. Okay.
All right.
First one. Think fast. Who was better, Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers?
Aaron Rodgers. So much more efficient.
Okay, I agree with you. Now, who was better, Sterling Sharp or Devontae Adams?
I might be showing my age here a little bit, but I'm going to go with Devontae Adams. You know, when Sterling Sharp was at his best, I was maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. So I know that may not be the most fair comparison, but for me, I'm going Devontae.
It's not here, but Jordy Nelson or Devontae Adams?
Oh, Devontae.
Okay,
No hesitation.
nice. Next one. Who would you choose? Who was better, Reggie White
Ooh.
or Charles Woodson?
Wow, you guys got the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah.
I got to go Reggie White.
Oh, okay.
I pick
Okay.
Muito.
And now, what is a special Packers game for you? You mentioned the Titans and Packers game 2020. Is there another special Packers game for you?
Yeah, so one that I was in attendance for, this was in 2013 or 2014. It was the final game of the regular season. They were playing the Detroit Lions. It was whatever year Aaron Rodgers had like the calf issue. I think that was 2014. So it was the last game of the season, getting ready for the playoffs. Rodgers goes down with his calf injury again, I think it was, and he's carted off the field. So literally 70,000 people in Lambeau Field, and you could have heard a pin drop. Like it was dead silent. Backup, I don't even remember. Maybe it was Scott Tolzien. Backup quarterbacks out on the field, and everyone's just wondering what's happening with Aaron Rodgers. So the Packers, I think they punt. The defense is on the field, and then the offense is back on the field, and Rodgers has been gone this whole time. And then where we were sitting, we were in the bowl where the Packers tunnel was straight across from us. And you saw a shadow, and standing in the tunnel was Aaron Rodgers. And he was waiting there because the offense was on the field and running a play. And so he knew the crowd was going to go nuts when he walked out. So he was waiting for the offense to be done with that play. And then when he came out, Lambeau, which was, like I said, dead silent, 70,000 dead silent, just erupted and went absolutely wild. I still get chills just thinking about it, just that moment. And, typical Aaron Rodgers comes back on the field, Packers win. But just that moment there, how within a 5-minute, because it wasn't long, it was maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you go from just this absolute low of like, oh my goodness, Aaron Rodgers just left the game with an injury right before the playoffs. Like, what's going to happen to him back on the field leading the offense 5-10 minutes later? It was just a roller coaster of emotion.
I would give probably not everything I have, but a lot of the things I have to one day be at Lambeau Field and watch the Green Bay Packers live. Now, as we're coming to the end of this live, the $1 million question for you is, are the Green Bay Packers winning the Super Bowl this year?
Of course.
Yes, we can be as fan as we can, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Of course. We're fans of the team. We know they have the talent. They're going to do it. This is the year.
Nice. So, Paul, we're coming to the end, and I want to give Guto the word right now to say thanks to you, to his last words, and then I'll be back here to thank you again. But Guto, anything you want to say?
Paul, thank you for your time, your participation. Love to work. Keep it up, and thank you. The Packers family is so big. This is so crazy, but I love it.
I just want to say to you guys, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. It was a ton of fun. Be happy to rejoin you at any time, and keep up the hard work. And as always, go Pack, go.
Yes, you can come back, okay? So you can't come back in your words. So you said you will be back. You will be back, okay?
All right, deal.
It was an honor. It was an honor to have you here, Paul. Thank you for your time. Thank you for spending this time with us. We're very happy to have you here. And as I said before, you are one of these guys that we're always looking for. Everything that we do here, we're always trying to repost things as fast as we can. So we're honored to have you here because we're so delighted with the work you do for the Green Bay Packers and the Green Bay Packers fans. So thank you so much for your presence here, and hopefully we can do this again another time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Now, we're going to end our live cast and I'm going to speak in Portuguese to our fans, ok? Muito bem, pessoal. Estamos terminando aqui. Espero que você tenha se divertido e aproveitado essa 1h10 de live com o Paul Bretl aqui na nossa livecast, episódio 208. Espero que você tenha aproveitado demais. Tem muita coisa aqui que nós conversamos. Eu e o Guto tivemos o privilégio de receber o Paul. E o que você faz com tudo isso? Compartilha, vai no YouTube, continua clicando no sininho, pede para o pessoal compartilhar, vai no podcast, no Spotify, porque nós queremos que você aproveite aquilo que nós conversamos aqui. Tá certo, gente? Então, com isso, eu deixo o meu boa noite ao Guto. Thank you, Paul, again. And go Pack Go. See you later. Até mais, pessoal. Tchau.